Welcome to Nice and Blunt. My name is Adam Riancho, and this is my 2025 three-round mock draft. We're going to go 100 picks deep, but if I was in the GM's shoes for every single team, this is what I would be doing. Here we go. We're going to use NFL Mock Draft Database Simulator. We're selecting all 32 teams. We're going 3 rounds deep. And let us begin. At number 1, the Tennessee Titans have done absolutely nothing to address quarterback this offseason, which means they are clearly going with Cam Ward at number 1. The consensus pick, I think this is the most obvious selection of the entire draft. Then at number 2, I think at this point, you have to go with the best player available. Travis Hunter offering that dual threat cornerback and wide receiver capability is the pick. No one will be upset, whether it's the GM, the owner, or the fan base especially, if you take Travis Hunter. If you let him fall, I think that's a mistake. So Travis Hunter to the Browns. And then at number 3, the Giants could possibly go Shedeur Sanders, but I think with the addition of Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, I don't think Brian Daboll wants to make it even more enticing to replace him and lose his job next year if this doesn't work out. So avoiding Shedeur Sanders and the Deion Sanders job replacement, I think is the move here. I think Joe Shane will go Abdul Carter, the last true blue chip prospect in this draft. The top 3, I think, are set in stone. Then at number 4, we have the Patriots, who I would love to give Ashton Jeanty. I think that would be an awesome fit for their offense. However, they need offensive tackle pretty desperately, and this is not a draft where you can get high quality options in the second and third round. They do not compare to the players who are available with pick 4. So it's maybe not the best player available here, but I do think based on necessity, I do think the Patriots will be going offensive tackle. I don't know for sure if Will Campbell is better than Armand Membou or Kelvin Banks, but let's give him Will Campbell. He did go viral last year for his work ethic. Then at number 5, we're going to go Mason Graham, kind of a needed position for the Jaguars. Their defense sucks, and drafting a player from Michigan, a team that won the national championship just 2 years ago, I think is an easy, safe pick. No one will be upset with Mason Graham here at number 5. On the clock at number 6, we have the Raiders, who were relying on Ameer Abdullah at running back late in the season. Although this draft is pretty deep at the position, why not get the best running back available? Ashton Jeanty, if available, will be a Raider at pick 6. Then at pick 7, the Jets passed on Brock Bowers last year. I think they regret it. And I do think Tyler Warren, while he's not as good, does have some relative upside to be a top 10 tight end. They need weapon pretty desperately. So while offensive tackle is tempting here, I don't think that's a terrible pick. I do think Tyler Warren is deserving of a top 10 selection. And after missing out on Brock Bowers, I think they rectify it. Go with Tyler Warren at pick number 7. Then at number 8, the Panthers also need offensive weapon, and I think they need a receiver desperately for the long term to pair with Bryce Young, because Adam Thielen will be retiring soon. Xavier Legette did not quite pay off, and I don't really trust anyone else they have. So Tet McMillan, I think, is deserving of that number 1 wide receiver prospect grade this year, and I do think he will be going to Carolina at pick 8. Tet McMillan out of Arizona goes to Carolina. Then at number 9, we have the Saints on the clock. And because of the news surrounding Derek Carr, I do think they're going to go with quarterback. I do think Shedeur Sanders is the selection here. While it's not my favorite landing spot for him, maybe Kellen Moore can get this offense right. There are some weapons like Kamara, Olave, and perhaps a healthy Rashid Shaheed. I think he still needs some help. We'll see what happens, but I do believe Shedeur will be going here at number 9 to New Orleans. I used to think he was going to fall all the way down to Pittsburgh at pick 21. But then at pick 10, we have the Bears on the clock. And if you asked me a week or two ago, I would have definitely given them Omarion Hampton. I think they would have reached on that player here at pick 10. However, if you look a little closer, they are back on the clock twice in the second round with pick 39 and 41. So because the position is so deep, they can still get a really good running back in the second round. I think they're going to pass, and I think they're going to address defense. They need a complement to Montez Sweat. So Jalon Walker, I think, is the best edge rusher left available. And out of Georgia, that's usually a very safe way to go drafting a Georgia Bulldog on defense. Let's go Jalon Walker out of Georgia to Chicago. Then at pick 11, the Niners are going to be desperate for a long time if they do not address the offensive line. Trent Williams will retire in the coming years. He's not going to be healthy forever. And in general, they are pretty weak at that position. So Armand Membou here, offensive tackle out of Missouri, I believe will be the pick. Whether it's him or Kelvin Banks, they will be going offensive tackle at pick 11. Then at pick 12, the Cowboys, their offense sucks. They need a lot of help in general. They're a possible candidate for Omarion Hampton as well, but I think wide receiver is the move here. I think they've kind of abandoned high-end running backs since that Zeke contract blew up in their face, and I think they can also get some good talent later on as well. So let's go Matthew Golden here. There aren't that many elite receivers in this year's class, and while it's a bit high for my taste, I think he's more likely a later end first round talent. I think wide receiver is just the position of need here. I believe Matthew Golden is the pick for Dallas. Then at pick 13, Miami is on the clock, and they did lose Teron Armstead to retirement. So Tua needs protection, and they're going to be pretty screwed if he gets hurt. So I think offensive tackle Kelvin Banks is the move. A pretty good player. I think it's a good value here at pick 13. Then at pick 14, if Tyler Warren, the tight end, is available, I do think they'll take him. I'm not convinced they will go Colston Loveland, though. I think if you can get Will Johnson, the other Michigan player, here on the board, I think that's a better acquisition. And it's not like the secondary is that good for the Colts. So I'm going to go Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan, kind of falling a little bit. I think he could go top 10 perhaps, but cornerback is not quite a position that I think is highly coveted in the first round. But Will Johnson is, in my opinion, clearly the best option at corner. So he's an Indianapolis Colt. And then I think we're going to see a mini run on edge rusher here in the next 3 picks. The Falcons are going to go Mykel Williams, edge rusher out of Georgia. He remains in Atlanta. I'm sure his family will be happy about this landing spot. They've gone offense the last 4 years straight. I think they need to pivot. I think the coach will be pounding the table for a defensive player. Then Arizona is on the clock, and I think Shemar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M, is the pick. Their defense isn't that great. Then we have the Bengals, who have paid heavily on offense this offseason, and there's a chance that they lose Trey Hendrickson in the short term. I'm not convinced he will stay and sign an extension with them. There's some weird vibes going on there. So for the foreseeable future, they need a cheap, inexpensive defense, and addressing it early and often in the draft, I think, is the move. We're going to send Mike Green out of Marshall to the Bengals. Now at pick 18, the Seahawks are on the clock, and they did add Cooper Kupp to pair with JSN, but they let go of Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. So they need someone outside to play X receiver, and I'm not convinced having multiple slot players is the best move. So they're also going to go back to Ohio State to address wide receiver position. In general, Ohio State is kind of a wide receiver factory. So Emeka Egbuka, I think, is deserving of a first-round pick, and I think Seattle needs wide receiver pretty badly. Let's send him to the Seahawks. Then at pick 19, the Tampa Bay Bucks, I think will focus on defense primarily, and at least according to this website, they need linebacker pretty bad. There are not that many first-round linebackers in this draft. So we're going to give them Jihaad Campbell. Do I know for a fact that that's the biggest position of need for them? No, I do not, but I think in general, their offense is kind of loaded, and I don't think they need to focus on that side of the ball too much. So defense, I think, is the name of the game here. Let's go Jihaad Campbell out of Alabama to Tampa Bay at pick 19. Now at pick 20, the Broncos are on the clock, and I've seen Omarion Hampton mocked to them many, many times, but just like the Bears, who I mentioned have multiple picks in the second round, this position is kind of replaceable in this draft. You can get really good options even in the third and possibly fourth round, and I don't think it's the best move for Denver. They need some wide receivers they can trust. Beyond Cortland Sutton, there's not that many, and that's why I think they're going to go wide receiver instead. I'm going to give them Luther Burden, wide receiver out of Missouri, here at pick 20 to pair with Bo Nix. They will be hitting running back in the second or third round, not in the first. So that means at pick 21, the Steelers are open to that position. They missed out on Shedeur, and I think they're going to pass on Jackson Dart. I think they're just going to trade for Kirk Cousins. Give me Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina, a very good player here at pick 21. I think this is the same slot they chose Najee Harris when he was a first-round pick, and Najee was let go this offseason. So Jaylen Warren is not the answer. He cannot handle all of the touches. They need someone else, and Hampton is the best player available. Give me Omarion Hampton to the Steelers at pick 21. Now the Chargers are on the clock, and if there's one thing we learned from watching them in the playoffs, they need weapons who can catch the ball. Colston Loveland is a very good receiver, maybe not the best blocker, but they have so many options on the O-line. I think they can afford a luxury like this. So great weapon for Justin Herbert. Obviously, he knows the coach. Jim Harbaugh knows exactly what he's getting. Colston Loveland at pick 22 is a Charger. Now at pick 23, the Green Bay Packers are on the clock, and it says here they need a corner. I think they're going to pass in the first round. They usually go defensive linemen and big body players in the first round, and their defensive coordinator used to be the head coach at Boston College. I think Donovan Ezeiruaka is a little bit slept on in these rankings. I do think he's a first-round pick, and at 23, I believe he will be reunited with his head coach. Ezeiruaka goes to the Packers at pick 23. Then at pick 24, the Vikings need help in the secondary, and the best safety available would be Malaki Starks. Let's send him to the Vikings, safety out of Georgia at pick 24. Now, pick 25, the Texans let go of their offensive tackle. They traded him away to the Commanders, and that means they need to replace him pretty badly. So Josh Simmons lines up here pretty well, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. I think it's a very safe pick, and in the back end of the first round, the last good tackle really left available. I think everyone else is more of a second round talent. Then at pick 26, we have the Rams on the clock who need help in the secondary, and if Jahdae Barron out of Texas falls this late, they will be rushing to take him. They will go cornerback at pick 26. Jahdae Barron is the selection. Now pick 27, we have Baltimore on the clock, and for some reason, really good players often fall to the Ravens every single year. And on PFF, Walter Nolen is rated much higher than this, and I do think Walter Nolen maybe goes higher than pick 27, but I think he'll be a Raven. If that is the case, they are lucking out once again. Let's send Walter Nolen out of Mississippi to the Ravens. Then at 28, we know that the Lions are only missing health on defense. That was the main reason they did not advance in the playoffs, in my view, and that's going to be their focus this year in the draft. So let's go with another Michigan defensive lineman to pair up with Aiden Hutchinson. Kenneth Grant remains in Michigan and is able to acclimate very comfortably to the NFL. That's a perfect landing spot, in my opinion, for Kenneth Grant. Now at pick 29, the Commanders are on the board, and they can go in really any direction. I could envision some offensive players being some targets for them. However, at this point in the draft, it's really not really worth it, in my view, to reach. So let's go with an edge rusher here. I think they need some help on defense. Let's go James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee at pick 29. He will be a Commander in my mock draft. Now at pick 30, we have Buffalo on the clock who need help on defensive line as well. They could go Nick Emmanwori. It says they need a safety also, but I think Derek Harmon is a safer pick. In general, I prefer drafting linemen, whether it's on offense or defense, in the first round if you don't have a clear, great offensive weapon to pivot to instead. So let's go Derek Harmon here. Maybe it doesn't happen, but I do think out of Oregon, that will be the pick. And then the Chiefs are on the clock, and they need help on offensive line desperately. Not only did it get exposed in the Super Bowl, they've also made some trades this offseason, and they need plenty of help. So while it could be on the interior, based on my research, it is much more likely you still get a solid interior offensive lineman in the second round as opposed to tackles. So maybe it's a reach, maybe it's a strange selection. I do like Greg Zabel a lot. I think Josh Connerly Jr. also fits a need that I think they need a little bit more, and it really dries up beyond him. There's really only one more I think is worth a second round pick. So I'm going to give the Chiefs Josh Connerly Jr. Offensive line is clearly the direction. Will it be tackle? Will it be interior? I think it's tackle because of the replaceability of interior O-linemen later on in round 2. Let's send Josh Connerly Jr. to the Chiefs at 31. Now at pick 32, the Eagles could really do anything. They kind of have a complete team already, but for some reason it's saying they need edge rusher, and I'm not totally convinced that's where they're going to go. Nick Emmanwori has fallen in this draft, so let's send him to the Eagles. They usually prefer like blue blood programs. I'm not sure that's their biggest desire. Perhaps they go with Donovan Jackson or Nick Scourton instead, but I think for the sake of making it simple on myself, I will be giving them Nick Emmanwori, safety, out of South Carolina. Now at pick 33, the Browns are on the clock. They passed on Shedeur Sanders in the first round, and I think it's because they do prefer Jackson Dart. I don't think it's that big of a drop-off, but I don't think he's that good either. So there's a chance, there's a high likelihood actually, that they trade up into the first round in order to take him because you get that fifth-year option. There's probably going to be a trade. Maybe it's even with the Eagles, just one spot, but I do think the Browns will be landing Jackson Dart around pick 33, somewhere between 25 and 33. Then at pick 34, we have the Giants on the clock here, and they need some help on the defensive line. They could also go cornerback because they did miss out on Travis Hunter, and I do think they kind of want some help in that department. So I'm going to give them Maxwell Hairston, cornerback out of Kentucky, next best player available at that spot. Now the Titans are on the clock, who need help on the edge. I feel like they also need a wide receiver pretty desperately, and they did trade away their third-round pick. So maybe they trade down. I do think top of the second is usually a coveted spot to get, and there's likely going to be a trade. I doubt the Titans actually make this pick. They're probably picking maybe 10 or 12 selections later and trading with someone else. But let's say they stick and pick. I'm going to give them Nick Scourton, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. They have a lot of holes on their team in general, and edge rusher is starting to dry up. I will give them the best option left on the board here at 35, Nick Scourton out of Texas A&M. Then at 36, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars on the clock, who need some help in the secondary. I think they also need some help on the offensive line, and I do think Gray Zabel has fallen enough. He's probably going in the first round, but in my mock, he has not yet been taken. Let's send Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State to Jacksonville at 36. The Raiders need some help in the secondary, and I'm going to give them Siobhan Revel Jr. out of East Carolina. He remains a pirate coming from college to the NFL. Now at 38, we have the Patriots on the clock, and they went offensive line in round 1, and while there are some good corners available right now, I think they're going to stick with offensive line as well. I think keeping Drake May healthy for the foreseeable future is the right move. Let's go Tyler Booker out of Alabama at pick 38. Now at pick 39, we have the Bears back on the clock, and like I mentioned earlier, they have 2 picks at 39 and 41. That is why I think they pass on Omarion Hampton. They can still get a really good running back here with these next 2 picks, and I think they're going to pass as well here. I do not think the Saints snipe them on running back at pick 40, and that's why I think they address offensive line here instead. They're going to go Erante Erseri, offensive tackle out of Minnesota, the last solid option available in this draft. It does drop off considerably after this player, in my view. We probably won't see another tackle for the most part until the late second, early third round at this position. So Erseri goes to Chicago, and then at pick 40, New Orleans, I think, wants to revamp their offense. I think in general, it is kind of hard to trust. So after missing out on offensive tackle, I think they're going to go wide receiver instead. I'm going to send them Trey Harris out of Mississippi, a solid second round pick. I don't know if he's exactly my favorite pick here, but I do think he's worthy of a second round pick. I want to send other players elsewhere that I ranked higher. So that's just my personal bias. I want to see some other guys somewhere else. Trey Harris goes to the Saints at pick 40. Now pick 41, Chicago is back on the clock, and like I mentioned, running back is the best value in round 2 this year. I think round 2 and 3 has a lot of talent at running back. That's why they pass in the first round at that position. Travion Henderson is still sitting here. If he goes to the Bears, they're going to have a really good combo with him and DeAndre Swift. Let's send Travion Henderson to the Bears at 41. Now the Jets are on the clock, and Jets need help at weapon tremendously. But they did go Tyler Warren. They also need some help on the offensive and defensive line, and that's why I think they pivot to defense. I'm going to give them Tyleik Williams, defensive lineman out of Ohio State. We might see a bit of a run on Ohio State players. Now the Niners are on the clock, and we addressed offensive tackle in the first round, but their entire O-line is kind of bad. I don't think they have that much depth in general. They need to keep Brock Purdy healthy, and that's why I'm going to give them Donovan Jackson, interior O-lineman out of Ohio State. There's a chance they go corner instead. They did lose Charvarius Ward, but I think locking up protection up front is the best way to go. It also helps the run game. Let's send Donovan Jackson out of Ohio State to the Niners at pick 43. Now at pick 44, the Cowboys are on the clock, and their offense was brutal last year, especially depth at running back is very thin. I don't think Javonte Williams is the long-term solution. So like I mentioned, this run from Ohio State continues. I'm sending Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State to Dallas. The last time they took a Ohio State running back, it did pan out pretty well. Quinshon Judkins goes to the Cowboys at 44. Now at 45, the Colts are on the board, and they could use a tight end, but I don't think they really care that much about that position. They also need some help on the offensive line, and I do think they're going to prioritize the offensive line a little bit extra. So I'm going to send them the highest ranked option in this draft. It's a bit of a reach, but still a second round pick is worthy of this player. I'm going to send Jonah Savainea out of Arizona to the Colts at pick 45. Now at 46, we have the Falcons back on the clock, and I believe we're going to see a strong run at the cornerback position here in the next 4 picks. The Falcons are going to kick it off, and I'm going to send Trey Amos out of Mississippi to Atlanta here at the cornerback position. They need some help in the secondary in general. The Cardinals also need plenty of help in the secondary. I'm sending them Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame here at 47. The Dolphins are on the clock, and it says they need safety. I think they could also address corner, but let's go safety. Let's go Xavier Watts. Back-to-back Notre Dame secondary players are selected at 47 and 48. Xavier Watts is a Dolphin. Now at 49, the Bengals need help in the secondary as well, and I do think Ezeiruaka Thomas is a solid option for them, but they also need help on the interior O-line. So let's take a look. I do like Tate Ratledge a decent amount, and while I could see them going corner, just addressing defense entirely in this draft, another priority would be keeping Joe Burrow upright and healthy. Let's send Tate Ratledge out of Georgia to the Bengals at pick 49. Now at pick 50, we have the Seahawks on the board, and I don't think Noah Fant is really the solution long term. This draft does have some solid tight end depth, especially even in round 3. I think they're going to hit this button here. They have another pick in 2 selections, and then they also have 2 more picks in the 3rd round. Let's go Mason Taylor out of LSU to the Seahawks. There's a chance that he gets sniped by Denver, although I do doubt it. It's probably not going to happen. Let's send Mason Taylor to Seattle at pick 50. Then at pick 51, the Broncos passed on running back in round 1 because the depth at the position is really solid this entire draft. And I think Caleb Johnson is a very productive player, definitely worthy of a top 60 pick. So I like him a lot. I think he's a really solid option, and they need some help. I don't think Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin are the long-term answer. Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa, is the pick at 51. Now the Seahawks are back on the clock, and they need some help on the offensive line. I think they will address it. On the interior, we're going to go Marcus Membou, interior offensive lineman out of Purdue at pick 52. It's possible their last 2 picks are swapped. They may go Membou at 50 and then Mason Taylor at 52. Regardless, I think those are the directions they will be going in. Then at 53, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock, and they need some help in the secondary. I think they're going to go with corner here. I have Ezeiruaka Thomas still on the board. I'm going to send him to Tampa Bay with the 53rd pick in this year's draft. Then the Packers are on the board, and I mentioned earlier there's some wide receivers I prefer over Trey Harris that I would like to see in other landing spots. So this is one of them. I believe Jaden Higgins is a solid 2nd round talent, and if he falls this far, I would love to see him on the Packers. I'm picking him to go to Green Bay at pick 54. Then at 55, I think we're going to see a run on receiver here. And I also think Jalon Noel, also out of Iowa State, is really good too. I think he's very solid, can really contribute. And last year we saw the Chargers take a wide receiver in the second round and it really panned out. So I like Jalon Noel. I think long-term he's a really good acquisition. And I think the Chargers need to draft weapons on offense to keep Justin Herbert viable. Allow him to throw with confidence that the receiver will catch it. We can't trust Quentin Johnston that much. So I really like Jalon Noel. I think it's a great pick here. I would love to see him on the Chargers. At pick 55, this is what I would do. Back-to-back Iowa State receivers come off the board. Then the Bills are coming on the clock, and I could also see them go wide receiver as well. They do need some help in the secondary, but I don't think there's like great options left available. And in general, their wide receiver core doesn't have a true alpha. I could see them adding a position every single year in the second and third round just to maintain depth and never have concerns that Josh Allen doesn't have solid weapons. So I think Jalen Royals is ranked a bit too low. I prefer him over Jack Betch and Elik Ayamanor, definitely over Isaiah Bond. I think the rankings here on this website are sleeping a little bit on Jalen Royals. So out of Utah State, I'm sending the wide receiver to Buffalo. I think that's a great fit. He will have a good career if he's paired up with Josh Allen. Now at 57, the Panthers need help rushing the passer. So I think they're going to go edge rusher here. I'm going to give them Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. I think going wide receiver round one and then pivoting back to defense is a pretty solid move here. I'm going to go Landon Jackson to the Panthers at 57. Then at 58, we have the Texans on the clock. And I also think the Texans need some long-term help at wide receiver. They did add Christian Kirk, but not sure if he's like a true great weapon anymore. Some injuries have plagued him in recent years. He should be fine, but I think long-term, if they can develop another option alongside Nico Collins, they'll feel pretty good. Unfortunately, Tank Dell may be out for the entire year in Houston. So wide receiver help was limited last season. I think Jack Betch out of TCU is the next best player. Let's send him to the Texans at 58. Now at 59, the Ravens are on the clock, and the Ravens have very few holes on their team in general. But one thing that has plagued them is when Lamar Jackson goes down, they are kind of screwed. So while they did add Cooper Rush in free agency, I think he doesn't quite fit the skill set of Lamar. When you have to change your offense based on the backup quarterback, sometimes things don't go as smoothly. So I think ideally you'd like to have a similar type of player as Lamar as his backup. And if Jalen Milroe is still here at 59, I think that is a perfect fit. So odds are he gets sniped, goes sooner. I doubt the Ravens trade up to get him, but because I haven't given him to anyone else, if he's sitting here at 59, the Ravens will pounce. I think Jalen Milroe is a perfect fit as the backup to Lamar Jackson. Not convinced he's ready to start just yet. I think he needs some time to develop, and I think by next year in that system, he will be a one-for-one great backup replacement for Lamar. So Jalen Milroe, good luck, my friend. You are a Raven in my mock draft. I really hope that works out for you. Detroit on the clock at number 60, I believe will continue to address defense in general. So Ohio State has two edge rushers available. You could go JT Tui Moloa'u, or you could go Jack Sawyer. Let's send Tui to the Lions at pick 60. A Michigan player and Ohio State player in the same draft. They'll find a way to coexist, put their differences aside, and enjoy their chance to compete for a championship with the Lions. Then at pick 61, the Commanders are on the clock, and while they did add Deebo Samuel, not convinced he's at his peak anymore, and I don't think long-term he is the best option. So I think the Commanders still need to address wide receiver, get some weapons to help out Jaden Daniels, and I do like Elik Ayamanor at this pick. I'm sending him to the Commanders. Now at 62, the Buffalo Bills are back on the clock. They picked just 6 picks ago. I gave them Jalen Royals. But now that they've addressed weapon, I think going back to defense is the safe pick. So I'm giving them an edge rusher. We went defensive line in round 1, and let's continue to hit it. Princely Uman Milen out of Mississippi is the pick here. We saw that's the only way to really blow out the Chiefs, have a ton of pass rushers that just completely disrupt their offensive line, the weakness of their biggest rival. So that's their focus. They're trying to beat the Chiefs. Let's send them in another edge rusher so that they can rush 4 and limit Patrick Mahomes as best as possible. Now the Chiefs are on the clock, and we did go offensive tackle in round 1, and I mentioned it's because I think you can still get solid depth on the interior even later. However, it has dried up. It's not that great, but I still think you can get a solid option here like Jared Wilson and still be somewhat happy. Anyone from Georgia, I'm willing to trust as probably someone that should be going higher than these rankings suggest. So let's send him to the Chiefs. Jared Wilson, interior offensive lineman out of Georgia, to Kansas City. Then at pick 64, the Eagles are back on the clock, and it says they need edge rusher. I'm not really convinced that's true. We could give them Jack Sawyer. That would be kind of simple and easy, but it also says they could use a linebacker as well. So he's fallen in these rankings, was ranked 48th. If he's available, let's send Carson Schwessinger out of UCLA to the Eagles at 64. Now we're entering the 3rd round, and I could envision the Giants grabbing a quarterback, but I'm not quite sure it's going to happen. I think they're just going to roll with Jameis, Tommy DeVito, and Russell Wilson, see what happens. They all probably lose their jobs in the front offense, regardless of what occurs. So let's just give them the best chance on defense. Here, I think out of Toledo, Darius Alexander is a good option. Let's add him to Abdul Carter and just have one of the best pass rushes available in the NFL. Darius Alexander to the Giants at 65. Now at 66, the Chiefs acquired this pick from the Titans, and it feels a bit unfair for them to be picking this high in any given round, but it is what happened, and I think they're going to address wide receiver, as they have done in round 2 in recent history. So with the 3rd pick in the 3rd round, I think they're going to make that decision. I prefer Kyle Williams over Isaiah Bond. That's just my personal preference. I think he's a 3rd round pick regardless. Maybe he goes later, but I do think he will be taken here by the Chiefs. Kyle Williams joins Mahomes and those other weapons in Kansas City. Now at 67, the Cleveland Browns are on the clock, and they need someone to replace Nick Chubb. I do not believe that Jerome Ford is the long-term answer. They need someone to complement him. So here in round 3, I think you can get some excellent running back depth, and I have Cam Skattebo going at 67 to the Browns. I think that will be a great fit for him, and I think he'll contribute from day one in Kevin Stefanski's offense. He knows how to use running backs very well. So Cam Skattebo is a Brown. And then at 68, the Raiders are on the clock. They go running back in round 1, cornerback in round 2, and here I think they pivot back to wide receiver and get someone on offense that can help Geno Smith. They don't have that many good options beyond Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. So Isaiah Bond, one of the last solid wide receivers left available, I think falls to Las Vegas here at pick 68. I am sending him to the Raiders in round 3. Then at 69, the Patriots are on the clock, and they need some help on defense. I'm going to give them TJ Sanders, defensive lineman out of South Carolina. Then the Jaguars are on the clock, and they did let go of Evan Ingram, and maybe Brenton Strange is actually that good, but I'm not convinced he's their long-term answer at that position. If anything, you need some help beyond him. You need some depth at the position, and I do think Elijah Arroyo might be going in round 2. I did have him fall considerably in this mock draft. So if he's available, I'm going to give them Elijah Arroyo. Perhaps he's going above Mason Taylor, and instead the Jaguars are grabbing Taylor themselves. But I do think tight end is definitely a consideration for them in the 3rd round. Now at pick 71, the New Orleans Saints are on the clock, and New Orleans needs running back. However, if he falls, I think Jack Sawyer is a really good contribution. Inevitably, Cam Jordan will retire. So I think they need some help at that position. And if he's here, let's send them Jack Sawyer. I could also see him going in the 2nd round, not the 3rd. Then at pick 72, the Chicago Bears are back on the clock. And I think they're also going to go defensive linemen themselves. That's kind of the best position to address in this draft. There's a ton of depth, whether it's an edge rusher or interior defensive lineman, as well as running back. Those are the 3 positions that you can hit a lot in this draft and still get good depth pieces as the rounds go by. So Alfred Collins sitting here has fallen 14 picks according to this website out of Texas. Let's send him to Chicago. Then at 73, we have the Jets on the clock, and Jets need help at receiver pretty desperately. But I think Tyler Warren is a player they're just going to bet on. Maybe Malachi Corley does step up now that Rodgers is gone. They also brought back Alan Lazard. They do have some options at receiver, and that position is kind of dried up, so I don't think I'm going to hit it for them. I think I'm going to go with defense once again, and I'm going to give them linebacker Demetrius Knight out of South Carolina, goes to the Jets at 73. Then at 74, we have the Panthers back on the clock. They took an edge rusher with their last pick. They could possibly double up and go with that spot again. However, they do need a corner in the secondary. So I'm going to give them Darian Porter out of Iowa State. Maybe not elite, but in round 3, you're not always getting the best of the best in general. So that's my pick. Cornerback out of Iowa State goes to Carolina. And then at 75, we do have the Niners back on the clock. They go offensive tackle, interior O-lineman in the first 2 rounds. And now I think they pivot to defense on that defensive line. Let's give them Braden Swinson, edge rusher out of LSU. At 76, we have the Cowboys, who went wide receiver and running back in round 1. I think now they go defense themselves, and let's give them Oluwafemi Oladejo, edge rusher out of UCLA. Then at 77, the Patriots back on the clock with their 4th pick in the top 100, and I could see them going cornerback for sure, but in general, I think they kind of just need the best player available, and they definitely don't need quarterback at all. So we're going to go Jordan Birch out of Oregon, edge rusher, just to complement TJ Sanders, a defensive lineman they picked just 8 selections ago. Then at 76, the Cardinals are back on the clock. They went with Shemar Stewart, edge rusher at Texas A&M in the first round, and I think they pair him up with a teammate of his, Shemar Turner, out of Texas A&M, and usually teammates like that do complement each other well. Doubling up on Texas A&M defensive lineman, not a bad move by Arizona. Shemar Turner is the pick at 78. Now the Texans are back on the clock, and like I mentioned earlier, defensive line is really the strength of this draft, and I've selected 4 or 5 in a row. I'm going to keep hitting it. Let's go Joshua Farmer out of Florida State to Houston. Just get the best quality option available. Now the Colts are on the clock, and here is where I think they hit tight end. They've passed on it for a while. Perhaps Jelani Woods can somehow stay healthy and contribute, but I doubt they have much confidence in him. Let's go Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green, a very good pass catcher. Not the best blocker, but did have 1,500 plus yards in college last season. Obviously, it's not the most competitive conference. It's not like it's the SEC or Big 12 or Big 10, but still, Harold Fannin Jr., I think, is a very good player. And at pick 80, I think he's a solid pick for the Colts. So let's send him there. They missed out in round 1. I think settling on Harold Fannin is a good consolation prize. Now pick 81, the Bengals are probably going to pivot back to defense. They're going to be paying offense for a long time, and I think they need help in the secondary. Let's go Andrew Makuba, safety out of Texas, goes to the Bengals at pick 81. Now at 82, the Seahawks have 2 picks in the next 10, and I think they need some help on the offensive line. I believe they will go Wyatt Millum out of West Virginia, offensive tackle, to try and protect Sam Darnold. Now at 83, the Steelers are back on the clock. It's been a long time since they've chosen Omarion Hampton in round 1. And in general, they usually add some pieces at receiver for the sake of depth. But I think the trade for DK Metcalf and last year's pick, Roman Wilson, hopefully can contribute. I think they're going to pass on receiver this time, and I think they're going to try and protect their quarterback. They may go Ozzie Trapilo. It's either offensive tackle or defensive lineman, but given the strength of this draft as defensive line, let's just stick with defensive line. So let's go Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee. In general, drafting a defensive lineman is probably just going to be the fail-safe that a lot of teams will pull when they're not quite sure if they have a tiebreaker between 2 players. So that's my pick, defensive lineman to the Steelers. And now at 84, the Bucs are on the clock, and it says here they need safety. I do not think they need a wide receiver at all. So let's give them the safety out of Penn State, Kevin Winston Jr. In general, Todd Bowles would like more help on that defense. Kevin Winston to the Bucks. Then at 85, we have the Broncos on the clock. They went Luther Burden, wide receiver, then Caleb Johnson, running back, in the first 2 rounds. And while they could use some help on defense, I think trying to protect Bo Nix with an offensive tackle is in general a relatively safe decision as well. So let's go Cameron Williams out of Texas, offensive tackle. Try to keep Bo Nix healthy and upright. Also help in the run game as well. Then at 86, the Chargers are back on the clock, and there's another Michigan player available. I do not think Jim Harbaugh will pass if Josiah Stewart is available. They did just let go of Joey Bosa. Another edge rusher will be needed. Long-term, Khalil Mack probably retires next year or the year after. Let's go Josiah Stewart out of Michigan at pick 86. Reunites with Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. Number 87, we have the Packers on the clock here, and it says they need cornerback. I'm going to believe it. Let's go Jacob Parrish out of Kansas State at pick 87. They could also possibly go Ozzie Trapilo, offensive tackle out of Boston College, if they want to reunite 2 Boston College players with their former head coach. It's possible, but I think they go Jacob Parrish and fill out that defense. Now the Jaguars are on the clock, and I think they need help in the offensive line in general. Let's go Ozzie Trapilo. Maybe they play him at tackle, maybe they move him around, but these last 2 picks, Jacob Parrish and Trapilo, may be swapped. I could see that happen. We'll find out. But let's give Jacksonville an offensive tackle. Now the Texans are on the clock, and I do think they need some depth at running back. They do not trust Dameon Pierce, and if Mixon goes down, they are screwed. So I think they need some help in that department. And while it does say they need an edge rusher, I think running back is the way to go here. Let's draft RJ Harvey and send him to Houston. I think he's a really talented running back. I like him in the 3rd round. I prefer him personally over Dylan Sampson, although it is pretty close. It could be either of them. Maybe even Bashal Tutin or Damian Martinez, even DJ Giddens. I think all these guys are solid picks in the 3rd. If any of them fall to the 4th, you're getting a pretty good running back value, in my opinion. The Rams on the clock now. Says they need wide receiver. I think they need tight end a little bit more, but in general, adding to that defense has been the way that they've preferred to go in the draft. So let's go edge rusher here. Ashton Gillott out of Louisville. An edge rusher, just adding more depth. I don't think they're ever going to regret that decision. So that's my pick for the Rams. And now the Ravens are on the clock, and they need an edge rusher as well. Let's give them Kyle Kennard out of South Carolina. Let's just play it safe and stick to the defensive line. Then Seattle's on the clock, their last pick of the 3rd round. And they kind of need some depth at quarterback. I'm not convinced Sam Darnold is that good. So maybe this turns into a Russell Wilson situation where Matt Flynn gets the contract, but the 3rd round rookie does replace him by the end of the year. It says to go Tyler Shaw, but I kind of prefer Will Howard. I'm going to send Will Howard instead to the Seahawks. At this point, though, you're getting a clear backup at that position. I'm not convinced they actually steal the job from Sam Darnold, but it is possible. You never know. Darnold could really disappoint. Then at 93, the Saints are on the clock, and they need tackle. They are going to go with Emory Jones Jr. here out of LSU to add to that depth. Then Cleveland is on the clock, and the Browns, I could see addressing defensive line. They passed on Abdul Carter, and they have gone completely on offense in the first 3 rounds up to this point. So I'm going to give them Dion Walker, defensive lineman out of Kentucky. At some point, they got to pivot to the defense. So that's my pick. Now the Chiefs are on the clock, and I think the Chiefs need to start planning to replace Travis Kelce. I think this is clearly his last year, and wouldn't shock me if this player already starts to contribute in year 1. I think they're going to go tight end here in the back end of the 3rd round. I like Gunnar Helm as the next best available tight end. Out of Texas, he will be a Kansas City Chief, in my opinion, at pick 95. Then at 96, we have the Eagles on the clock, the last pick before all of the compensatory selections, and the Eagles don't need that much help in general, but wide receiver is a bit thin. Maybe they really trust Jahan Dotson, but perhaps they don't. So let's send them Savion Williams, wide receiver out of TCU. I'm not convinced this is actually going to be the pick, but a solid depth piece long term. I think it helps them. Then at 97, we have the Vikings on the clock here. And it says they need defensive linemen, but I'm actually going to give them an interior offensive lineman. I like Charles Grant here out of William and Mary for the Vikings to try to protect J.J. McCarthy or whoever they end up settling on at quarterback. Let's keep that player healthy. So that's the pick, Charles Grant. And at pick 98, the Dolphins are now on the clock, and they probably need some help in the secondary. I could see them going cornerback earlier. They went safety Xavier Watson round 2. Let's hit cornerback here. Let's go Denzel Burke out of Ohio State to the Dolphins. I think their secondary, once they lose Jalen Ramsey, will be pretty thin in the long term. Even Xavier Howard might be on his way out. So that's my pick for the Dolphins, a cornerback out of Ohio State. Then the Giants at 99 are on the clock. I could also see them drafting a backup quarterback, but they have 3 on the roster already. Let's pass. They'll probably just pivot to that position next year. Let's go offensive tackle instead. Let's go Anthony Belton out of NC State to the Giants at 99. Then at 100, for some reason, the Niners every single year draft a running back in the late 3rd round. I think they do it again. Let's give them Dylan Sampson, best available running back out of Tennessee. I think that'd be a nice fit, and long-term might have a clear path for success. If McCaffrey goes down, if Garendo does not pan out, Sampson is a solid option. And like I said, round 3, round 4 running backs, there's still a lot of good, talented players available on the board. So Dylan Sampson goes to the Niners, and then the Rams are on the clock. I think they're going to go with a tight end. We saw Tyler Higbee missing last year, and they struggled to replace him. I'm going to give them Terrace Ferguson, and maybe it takes a while for him to pan out, but I do think depth at tight end will not be regretted long term. Let's go Terrence Ferguson, the last tight end I kind of trust in this year's draft. Then at 102, the last pick of this draft is the Lions, and it'd be fun to give them DJ Giddens, another running back. Maybe Dave Montgomery doesn't last too much longer, but I think a safer pick is just to stick on defense and try and add some depth in the secondary. They went defensive line twice earlier in this draft. Let's go Billy Bowman, safety out of Oklahoma, with this pick at 102. That is it for my mock draft. So here on the screen are all my picks. Let me know what you think in the comment section, whether you agree or disagree, if you like some of these decisions, if you thought some players fell way too far. Let me know what you think. I'm very curious about your opinion, and I cannot wait to find out what actually happens on draft day a week from today. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. It's been fun. I enjoy this video on a yearly basis. This is the 3rd year running. I'll see you next time on Nice and Blunt. My name's Adam Riancho. Thank y'all for watching.